This is a homily for the third Sunday of Easter. The Gospel for this Sunday comes from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 21, verses 1 to 19. To download the text of this homily as a PDF file, go to sundayhomilies.au. As we saw last Sunday, there are 4 appearances of the risen Lord in the final 2 chapters of John's Gospel. In chapter 20, the risen Lord appears 3 times in Jerusalem. Firstly, to Mary of Magdala, who was standing outside the empty tomb, weeping. In the evening of that same day, the Lord appears to the disciples who were in a closed room for fear of the Jews. The Apostle Thomas was not with the disciples on that occasion, and when they tell him of the Lord's appearance, he refuses to believe unless he can see and touch for himself. 8 days later, the Lord appears again to the disciples, and this time Thomas is with them. The final words of chapter 20 read like the conclusion to the Gospel. However, there is a following chapter which has a similar but shorter conclusion. There are many other things that Jesus did. If they were written down one by one, I do not suppose the world itself would contain all the books written. There is a scholarly consensus that chapter 21 is a later addition to the 4th Gospel, but scholars are divided on whether the material in John chapter 21 was added by the evangelist himself or by a later hand. Whatever the case, the addition must have been made very early, because the extant manuscripts of John's Gospel, including the most ancient, all contain chapter 21. Chapter 21 is set by the shore of the Sea of Tiberias. The Sea of Tiberias, also known as the Sea of Galilee, is actually a large freshwater lake. The Sea of Tiberias takes its name from the city of Tiberias. The city of Tiberias was founded on the west coast of the lake in 20 AD by Herod Antipas, Tetrarch of Galilee, as a new capital to replace Sepphoris. Antipas named the city in honour of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. There are 4 distinct scenarios in today's Gospel. Firstly, the disciples fishing at night. Secondly, breakfast by the seashore. Thirdly, Jesus asks Simon Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And finally, Jesus indicates the kind of death by which Peter will give glory to God. So let's consider the first scenario. 7 of the disciples have been on the lake fishing all night, but they have caught nothing. Note the rich symbolism of light and darkness in today's Gospel. In fact, the motif of light and darkness resonates throughout the 4th Gospel. Let's begin, though, by going to the 1st chapter of the book of Genesis. Genesis begins with the words, "In the beginning, God created heaven and earth." In the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, those words, "in the beginning," are en arche. Let's now turn to the beginning of John's Gospel. John's Gospel also begins with the words en arche, in the beginning. So by beginning his Gospel with exactly the same 2 words that begin the book of Genesis, John is subtly saying, in the book of Genesis we have the story of God's creation of the world. This Gospel that you are now reading is about God's recreation of the world, or perhaps the bringing of present creation into line with the original design of God, a design that up until now has been thwarted by human sin. And how does the story of creation begin in the book of Genesis? It begins with a formless void, and there was darkness over the deep. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In the prologue to John's Gospel, we read that the Word was the true light that enlightens all people, a light that shines in the dark, a light that darkness could not overpower. But later, in chapter 3, we read, "Though the light has come into the world, people have shown that they prefer darkness to the light." Then, in chapter 8, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." Keep in mind that John's Gospel sets a number of episodes against the backdrop of Jewish festivals, and chapters 7 to 9 are set against the backdrop of the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, as it's called in Hebrew. In chapter 7, verse 2, we read, "The Jewish festival of Tabernacles was near." One of the main symbols of the Feast of Tabernacles was light. Keep in mind that during the Exodus, God led his people by a pillar of cloud that became a pillar of fire by night. This was symbolized by the lighting of 4 great lampstands located in the temple in the courtyard of the women. You can see here the top of the lampstands circled. The Mishnah describes the lighting of these lampstands at the close of the first day of the festival. And the Mishnah tells us that these lampstands produced so much light that there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that did not reflect the light. Against this backdrop, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." Let's now turn to today's Gospel. This final chapter of John's Gospel returns to the theme of darkness and light. Following the death and resurrection of Jesus, the disciples have returned to Galilee. It is night time, and Simon Peter decides to go fishing. 6 of the disciples join him. The disciples toil all night in the darkness, but they catch absolutely nothing. This is John's way of telling us that any venture undertaken in darkness will end in futility. Darkness, in this context, is a way of speaking about being alienated or cut off from God. At dawn, a figure appears on the shore of the lake. We know that it is Jesus, but the disciples fail to recognize him. This stranger, standing by the shore in the early morning, calls out to them, "Throw out your nets to starboard, and you'll find something." So the disciples lower their nets, and to their utter amazement, they catch a huge haul of fish. Obedient to his command, in the light of day, they experience success beyond all expectation. This last sign at the end of the Gospel calls to mind the very first miracle in John's Gospel. At a wedding feast at Cana in Galilee, the wine runs out. To run out of wine was not simply a social embarrassment, it entailed a serious loss of family honour. The mother of Jesus tells him what has happened. So Jesus gives instructions. Fill the jars with water. Jesus then changes this water into wine, and not just any old wine, but an abundance of the finest wine. So here at a wedding feast at Cana in Galilee, Jesus gives a command. Fill the jars with water, and there is wine in abundance. Here again, by the shore of the Sea of Tiberias in Galilee, Jesus gives a command. Throw the net out to starboard, and there are fish in abundance. As I've pointed out before, the Gospels never use the word miracle. John's Gospel in particular uses the word sign, semeon in the Greek. Miracles are signs pointing to Jesus, revealing something about his identity. They're like a road sign pointing us in the right direction. At the beginning and at the end of John's Gospel, we have a command of Jesus followed by an abundance of wine and of fish. Signs pointing to Jesus, who said, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. This is closely related to the words of Jesus in chapter 15. I am the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. The disciples, fishing at night, in the darkness, catch nothing. When they obey the command of Jesus, there is an abundance. Let us return to the disciples on the Sea of Tiberias. The disciple whom Jesus loved said, It is the Lord. At these words, It is the Lord, Simon Peter, with characteristic boldness, jumped into the water and made his way to the shore. The other disciples followed behind in their boats. This brings us to the second scenario in today's Gospel. Breakfast by the seashore. As soon as the disciples reach the shore, they see that there is some bread there and a charcoal fire with fish cooking on it. This seemingly incidental detail, that it's a charcoal fire, is the interpretive key to what happens next in the Gospel. But first of all, can you think of another occasion recorded in John's Gospel where people are gathered around a charcoal fire? It is, of course, the evening we call Holy Thursday. Jesus has been arrested, and while he is being interrogated, Peter is outside, standing in the shadows, afraid that he might be recognized. But it's a cold evening, and he joins a small group of people huddled around a fire. The Gospel tells us, Now it was cold, and the servants and guards had lit a charcoal fire and were standing there warming themselves. Note, a charcoal fire. But it's not only the charcoal fire that links these two episodes, it's also Peter being questioned, or to be more precise, Peter being asked 3 questions. While Jesus is being interrogated, Peter is outside around the charcoal fire. He is asked, Aren't you another of that man's disciples? He replies, I am not. Then a second time, Aren't you another of his disciples? And again an adamant denial, I am not. And a third time, Didn't I see you in the garden with him? And again a denial. 3 questions around a charcoal fire. And that's what we have in today's Gospel by the shore of the Sea of Tiberias. 3 questions. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these others do? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my lambs. A second time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Look after my sheep. And a third time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And we're told that Peter was upset that Jesus asked him a third time. No doubt it reminded him of the time that he had been questioned 3 times in the courtyard while warming himself around a charcoal fire. Then he had denied even knowing Jesus. "Yes, Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Feed my sheep. 3 questions and a charcoal fire. New Testament scholar Brendan Byrne offers this reflection. With great delicacy, beside this second fire, Jesus submits Peter to a triple interrogation concerning love. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He has not been scolded or reprehended. There is no recrimination for his triple failure. But he has been deeply probed. The allusion to his triple failure by an earlier charcoal fire is patent. It is not so much a matter of being forgiven as being healed. There is no explicit mention of the past. Each question about love is followed by the new commission looking entirely to the future. Peter, the one who has failed, whose failure has been subtly acknowledged and owned at depth, is to take over the pastoral role of the Good Shepherd. I'd like to spend a few moments reflecting upon one aspect of these 3 questions about love that is not apparent in our English translation of the text. It has to do with the Greek words that are used for love. You'll notice that Jesus asks Simon, son of John, 3 times, "Do you love me?" 3 times Simon assures Jesus that he loves him. However, the Greek text of John chapter 21 verse 15 uses 2 different verbs for love. When Jesus asks Simon, the Greek verb used for love is agopao. When Peter responds to Jesus, the Greek verb used for love is phileo. It's exactly the same when Jesus asks Simon a second time. However, the third time Jesus asks Simon, the Greek verb changes from agopao to phileo. What are we to make of that, if anything? What do contemporary New Testament scholars have to say? Brendan Byrne tells us that the change is purely stylistic and involves no lessening or increase of intensity, and that, we're told, is the scholarly consensus today. The 2 verbs are used interchangeably across the 4th Gospel. Gail O'Day tells us that these 2 verbs are used as synonyms throughout the Gospel, with no difference in meaning. Andrew Lincoln says that the 2 verbs can be used interchangeably, as they have been earlier in John's Gospel. Craig Keener tells us that rhetorically skilled writers regularly employed synonyms for the sake of rhetorical variation, and the 4th Gospel uses agopao and phileo interchangeably. Let's see what some exegetical dictionaries of the New Testament have to tell us. The Exegetical Dictionary of the New Testament, edited by Bowles and Schneider, states that phileo and agopao are synonymous in the New Testament, and attempts to determine distinctions that transcend mere feeling for language are not persuasive. Mounce's Complete Expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words says that to make firm distinctions between phileo love and agopao love is incorrect, for the meanings of the 2 words overlap. Moreover, in John chapter 21 verses 15 to 27, the 2 words do not have distinctly separate meanings, and John is famous for using virtual synonyms without difference in meaning. He often switches between words merely for the sake of variety. However, Strong's Concordance does make a distinction between phileo and agopao. It tells us that the Greek verb agopao refers to a selfless, sacrificial, unconditional love. It is often used in the New Testament to describe the love of God for humanity and the love that believers are called to have for God and for one another. This type of love is characterized by a commitment to the well-being of others regardless of personal cost or reciprocation. The verb agopao and its noun form, agape, were relatively rare in classical Greek literature. The New Testament writers adopted and expanded the meaning of agopao to express the unique divine love revealed in Jesus Christ. This love transcends human emotions and is rooted in the will and character of God. The Greek verb phileo is used to express a type of love characterized by friendship, affection, and fondness. It denotes a warm, tender, and personal love, often associated with close relationships and emotional bonds. Unlike agopao, which is often used to describe a more unconditional, sacrificial love, phileo emphasizes mutual respect and shared experiences. In ancient Greek culture, phileo was commonly used to describe the love between friends and family members. Where does all of that leave us? First of all, it is true that John's Gospel uses synonyms that don't have any significant difference in meaning. The evangelist often switches between words for the sake of rhetorical variation. So, for example, in verses 15 and 16 of today's Gospel, the verb to know is eido. In verse 17, however, he uses the verb ginosko. In verses 15 and 17, the Greek verb for feeding is bosko, while in verse 16, the verb poimeno is used. It means to tend or to shepherd. And finally, in verses 15 and 16, we have lambs, anion in Greek, while in verse 17, we have probaton. So as you can see, we have a number of variations in these three verses for the words know, feed, and lambs. New Testament scholar D.A. Carson concludes, "By now it has become clear that the evangelist constantly uses minor variations for stylistic reasons of his own. This is confirmed by the present passage. If the variation in the words for know, feed, and lambs have not stirred homiletical imaginations, it is difficult to see why the first pair should." The New International Version is the only modern translation of the New Testament that gives us a different translation for phileo and agopao. The verb agopao is translated as truly love, while the verb phileo is translated simply as love. So it appears to be a matter of intensity. So is all of this much ado about nothing, or is the evangelist making a subtle point? Going against the scholarly consensus, Timothy Radcliffe believes that there is a difference between the two words for love used by the evangelist. Innumerable articles have been written on the meaning of the words agapan and philein. Radcliffe is here using the infinitive form of both verbs. Some have asserted that they mean the same thing, and so the alternation is without significance. This is not plausible. In John's Gospel, every word is weighed and measured, as in a poem. Radcliffe offers two possible explanations for the alternation of the words for love. The first is that agape is the beautiful, divine love that typifies Christianity, the unselfish, almost disinterested love that reaches out to strangers and even enemies. And so Jesus twice asks Peter if he loves him in this pure and transcendent way. But all that Peter can offer is the warm friendship of philia. He cannot reach as high as agape. Finally, Jesus asks him for what he does offer. Simon, son of John, do you love, philes, me? Jesus contents himself with the small love of which Peter is capable. It's as if God were to say, I will take whatever you can manage. If you can only give me a little love, that will be enough. God humbly accepts the small portion of affection that we sometimes remember to offer him, even though God has for us a love which is infinite. In the words of the poet W. H. Auden, if equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. When we love someone more than they love us, we are sharing God's own pain and joy. Radcliffe offers another possible interpretation. But it might be the other way around. Perhaps philia here implies a warm love. Jesus asks whether Peter loves him, and he replies, yes, I love you dearly. Peter is stressing the human affection of his love. After his friend's denials, Jesus does not initially ask for so much until Peter has opened the way. We too, when we love someone who has betrayed us or drifted away, may not initially dare to ask for much. We do not push the pace and demand fulsome declarations. We respect their freedom, no pressure, until they show they are ready for more. The humility of the Lord is thus only to dare to ask for our warm philia when we have shown that we wish to give it. We now come to the final scenario of today's Gospel. Just as Jesus, the Good Shepherd, laid down his life for his sheep, Peter also will lay down his life for the sheep. Jesus tells him, Amen, amen, I say to you, when you were young, you put on your own belt and walked where you liked. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will put a belt round you and take you where you would rather not go. The Gospel makes it clear that by these words Jesus indicated by what sort of death Peter would glorify God. Although the Gospels do not recount the death of Peter, we know that Peter spent his last years in Rome and was martyred there. Here you can see Caravaggio's famous painting of the crucifixion of St. Peter. This painting reflects an ancient tradition that Peter was crucified, but upside down, in the Circus of Nero within months after the fire of Rome in 64 AD. St. Peter was martyred in the Circus of Nero, located in an area known to ancient Romans as Vaticanum. There was a cemetery alongside the circus, and this is where the body of Peter was laid to rest following his martyrdom. About 90 years later, Pope Anicetus built a memorial shrine at the site of Peter's tomb. Anicetus was Bishop of Rome from 152 to 160 AD. In the 4th century, the Emperor Constantine built the first basilica over the site of Peter's grave. Work on the basilica began in 324 AD. And here you can see a reproduction of what the first St. Peter's Basilica would have looked like. Alongside it, you can see the remains of Nero's circus. And here is the same site as you see it today. The present St. Peter's replaced the basilica built by Constantine in the 4th century. St. Peter's grave lies directly below the great dome of the basilica. Peter may have failed at the time of Jesus' passion, but faithful to the Good Shepherd, whose successor he became, Peter glorified God by laying down his life for the flock that Jesus had entrusted to him. As Jesus glorified God by dying upon the cross, Peter was united with his Master's glorification when he too died, having stretched out his hands upon a cross.